think everyone's remembering back to Marcus Colston last year. We'll see if the Saints can get a second day steal this year.
Yeah,
again.
Toiling in obscurity, used to be what these small school kids did, but not anymore. It seems the Saints have kind of got their feelers out all over the place. You'll have to forgive Sean Payton if he has a soft spot for players from small schools. Having played at Eastern Illinois himself, the Saints head coach knows firsthand the only NFL talent doesn't necessarily just come from the BCS schools, although the Saints' first selection in day 2 of the NFL draft came from a school that played for the BCS title game. Jim Henderson is live at Saints camp with a recap of today's selections. Jim?
Scott, the Saints began the day with 2 picks in the 4th round, and the first one was somewhat of a surprise. From Ohio State, the running back Antonio Pittman. Not an area of need for the Saints, but they felt he was too good to pass up the first team all Big Ten selection of 4.5, 140, 22 touchdowns in his career. He's 5'11", 195, and a 2-year starter. With their second pick in the 4th round, they hope they got this year's Jari Evans, who was taken in the 4th round last year out of Bloomsburg. This year, with their second pick in the 4th round, it's Jermon Bushrod, an offensive tackle from the Towson Tigers. In the 5th round, David Jones, a cornerback from another small school, Wingate, 6 foot 196. The Saints had another pick in the 5th round, but they traded up in the 4th to select Pittman and sacrificed that choice. No choice in the 6th round for the Saints, and with their 7th and final selection, they took Marvin Mitchell, a linebacker from the Tennessee Vols. Now, there might be some issues with all of these players, but Sean Payton says character won't be one of them.
The guys that have the character issues that concern us, we put a color on them, and really we're just not taking them. I mean, if the guy's got issues in round 2 or round 1, but he's still there on round 4, he still has those same issues that are going to hurt the locker room and hurt the team. So, there's a certain level of responsibility we feel as a organization that that we owe to our players as well that are in that locker room of. We're looking to bring in the right guys that put the team first, that want to win, want to work hard, and represent this organization the right way.
And we'll get a chance to meet these guys when they arrive for rookie minicamp in 2 weekends. Scott?
Thank you so much, Jim. Players with local ties going in day.
I have to tell you, I'm amazed by Dawn Brown. A month ago, she doesn't even know who Nick Saban is. Now she's analyzing the Saints draft.
We're going to have a special for Dawn Brown. Dawn Brown's take on the draft.
And she likes it. She's happy with it.
Stay tuned. That could be a pretty interesting show. After more than 18 hours, the longest draft in NFL history, Ramsey Robinson of Alabama became Mr. Irrelevant. That's the title given to the last player drafted. In all for the Saints over the weekend, 7 draft picks, including 4 on Sunday. With a recap of day 2, here's Jim Henderson.
I think it's a little different.
Essentially, the Saints were on the clock for about 12 hours last night, thinking about what they wanted to do in the 4th round this morning when the draft resumed. Their conclusion, move up if we have to for Ohio State running back Antonio Pittman. And so they did, trading away one of their 5th round choices to nab a player some had forecast as a 2nd round selection. Coach Sean Payton says you try to match a grade with a need. In Pittman's case, the grade was too high to ignore, though the need was not a great one.
It was really a matter of we just saw a guy up there that we had put a decent grade on, a pretty good grade on, that we felt would give us depth at the position, and we'll see how he fits.
Obviously, Pittman's drafting doesn't imperil the roster spot of Deuce McAllister or Reggie Bush, though it very well could Aaron Steckers. The veteran, who'll be 32 this season, has been frequently nicked and averaged just 2.8 yards per carry in a limited role last year. With subsequent picks, the Saints hope to strike small school lightning for a 2nd straight year with a tackle and a cornerback, and closed with a Tennessee linebacker, bookending their draft with Vols. Left unaddressed in their 7 picks, a young defensive tackle.
Obviously, the grade didn't match the round, and there are a number of positions you'd like to get young at, but we weren't just going to go look for a defensive tackle and draft one to fill that. So you keep going and you keep moving.
As the Saints hope that with their selections this weekend, they moved closer to a championship. At Saints camp, Jim Henderson, Eyewitness Sports, Night Watch.
Early.
Fell to us at 27, and that selection, I said yesterday, was a pretty easy one to make, and we were excited to make it.
But probably not as excited as the Meacham family. Meacham, who left Tennessee after his junior season, put up gaudy numbers: 71 catches, including 11 touchdowns, and a school record 1,298 yards receiving. But his off-the-field approach is decidedly low-key.
I'm just do my best to help in every way, stay humble, and make all the yards after the catch as possible.
Meacham will immediately shoulder some substantial expectations from Saints fans. With Joe Horn gone to the Falcons as a free agent, there's a void to be filled. Meacham hopes to be one of the players who will do it.
He got traded, but that's okay. With the young receivers that we're going to have, we're going to make the best of it.
At the NFL Combine, Meacham ran the 40-yard dash in 4.39 seconds and had a 37.5 vertical leap. Some impressive stats for him. Ed, I like this pick. It's not necessarily where I thought they would go with it, but I think it opens up the potential to have a great 1-2 combination with Marcus Colston for a long time. If Devery Henderson happens to fill expectations, then you have 3 very successful young receivers.
And you've got Eric Johnson at tight end. We know what the Saints have at tailback. They've got an outstanding quarterback that they've got to keep healthy. This could be an incredibly explosive offense, score even more points than last year. And I think you're seeing the philosophy of going for the best player available. Darrelle Revis, the Jets traded up to get him. Aaron Ross was off the board. So cornerback at that point, perhaps not an option. So they went with a guy who can fly.
Meacham can.
Let's hope he flies and after he catches the football. Back in a minute.
Just 30 minutes.
In round 4, the Saints traded up to draft at their deepest position. The Saints chose Ohio State running back Antonio Pittman, who was projected as a second-round pick. Pittman rushed for 1,233 yards for the Big Ten champions. He also started 25 consecutive games. Head coach Sean Payton said drafting Antonio Pittman doesn't mean he believes in Deuce McAllister any less.
We've got a great amount of confidence in Deuce and what he brings to the table, and the same thing with Reggie. So more than anything else, it was a young back in day 2 really that appealed to us, nothing more than that.
Pittman said he was shocked at his selection by the Saints. He said the only time he spoke with the Saints was at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis in February.
You're watching Chrysler Dodge Jeep Draft Day 2007.
Conversation must have gone pretty well. It's a coaching maxim that applies to every NFL team every year. Improve or get left behind. The Saints weren't the only team in the division trying to get better this weekend.
You betcha. With more on what the rest of the NFC South accomplished in the draft, let's bring in Sean Temple. Sean?
Well, you know, guys, in the last 4 years, each team in the NFC South has won a division title. The Saints went into the offseason with that stat in the back of their mind, looking to change recent history. But that also meant that the other 3 teams were hoping to buck that trend, both in the offseason and this weekend's draft. The Buccaneers are the only team in the NFC South to win a Super Bowl ring, and the reason for their dominance that season and beyond was their defense. But that defense is starting to wrinkle.
It's been 52 pickup for them. I mean, they've run across the rosters all there. Cato June being brought in, I think, was a nice addition, along with Kevin Carter. But, you know, to me, they got to improve that defense. That was their rock defensive for years.
So with the 4th pick, they hope to find their new rock, Clemson defensive end Gaines Adams.
Gaines Adams, best pass rusher in this draft, no question about it. Simeon Rice getting up in age, and so that was a good selection for them.
In the 2nd round, the Bucs went to the O-line and snagged former Volunteer tackle Aaron Sears.
Aaron Sears, to me, tremendous football player, can play tackle or guard for you, big road grader. I know one thing, Cadillac Williams is happy.
The South team to hand their card in next to the podium was the Atlanta Falcons, who took an old approach to the offseason, bringing in the Saints' old receiver, Joe Horn, and beginning the draft with an old name from their Dirty Bird past, Jamal Anderson. Only this Jamal specializes in stopping running backs.
I thought Atlanta did a nice job. They picked up a tremendous pass rusher, potentially in Jamal Anderson. Young kid from a wideout who's grown into that spot, really has excellent speed off the edge.
And then there's the Carolina Panthers, whose offseason has come up short looking for impact players at linebacker and safety, but help themselves with Miami linebacker John Beeson.
Johnny Beeson's a guy that's played across the board, and with Dan Morgan's concussion problems, you need somebody that can be a hybrid type player. He's played both inside and outside, very active performer. They like that type of big play guy.
And although they have Steve Smith and Keyshawn Johnson in the wide receiver fold, Reggie Bush's former teammate at USC, Dwayne Jarrett, will be looked to as the future in Panther country.
Dwayne Jarrett, kind of a carbon copy of what you have already in Keyshawn Johnson. You see what they're trying to do to get someone who will balance off Steve Smith. So listen, all in all, I thought the division really helped himself out in the draft.
Now, last year, the Saints were not only the top offensive team in the South, but in the entire NFL. In total, the Falcons, Bucks, and Panthers drafted 29 players. 17 of those were on the defensive side of the ball. So the rest of the division trying to keep up with the Joneses over there. Back to you guys.
I don't think there's any doubt. If you look at Jamal Anderson in the first round by Atlanta, Tampa goes for a defensive player, although they wanted Calvin Johnson. You know, if they're going to keep up with the Saints, they've got to get better defensively, right, Sean?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you look at what they did last year coming into the games. Atlanta, 2 losses to the Saints. Carolina did get the 2 wins. But, yeah, absolutely. They lost Patrick Kearney to free agency. He went to Seattle. So, I mean, the front line for Atlanta really had to get better and get better quick. And they did it with Jamal Anderson.
And I think, Ed, the funny thing about it, too, is Sean Payton says, you guys want to stack the defensive side of the ball. Fine, we're going to keep going after more offense. They get Robert Meacham with the first-round pick. And then with the 4th-round pick, they go out and get Antonio Pittman. I think the Saints were just surprised that a guy of his caliber was still there on the second day. As they mentioned, I don't think they necessarily were targeting a running back, but this is a guy who was the best running back on one of the best teams in the country. He's not a spectacular player. He has good speed, but he will grind out a lot of yards if he gets on the field.
You know what I find most interesting about this whole situation in the NFC South, Adam, Sean, is that when you look at the Saints, Atlanta changed coaches. Carolina, John Fox might be on a short leash, and so is John Gruden in Tampa. It's amazing how quickly this division can turn around.
Yeah, you know, John Gruden, I think, has got the shortest leash of all of those coaches. That was one of the reasons they brought Charles Grant in for a look-see to get that defense better, and that's why they got Gaines Adams to play on that front line. You got 2 defensive ends that are 33 years old. Rondé Barber is 33 as well. With Drew Brees, you've got to stack up your defensive back. Chris Houston, a guy for Atlanta, he comes from Arkansas to help try to shut down Robert Meacham as he did when Tennessee and Arkansas played this year.
And guys, I think the bottom line, there's still a lot of parity in this division. Even though Tampa stumbled a great deal last year, only won 4 games, there's still, it looks on a year-to-year basis. You look every year at the NFC South, it seems like another team jumps to the top of the heap. It almost seems cyclical. So there's not a whole lot separating these teams in this division, I don't think.
Never been a repeat champion in the NFC South. Well, maybe this is the year. Back in a minute.
You're watching Chrysler Dodge Jeep Draft Day 2007.
Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back. Earlier in the offseason, Joe Horn and the Saints locked horns. Joe Horn cut on February 28th, and after his dismissal, he said a personality clash led to his departure. Horn then quickly signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Today, Saints head coach Sean Payton addressed the issue publicly for the first time.
Payton said Horn's departure was not about personality, but about pay. The 35-year-old was due a roster bonus of $1 million in March. His base salary was to be $4.4 million.
It became really more of a business decision there. He was my kind of player. You know, he's a guy that I felt is tough. I think he's competitive.
A stubborn groin injury forced Horn to the sidelines for the final 4 regular season games and the playoffs. But Joe Horn said he was healthy enough to play in the NFC Championship game at Chicago. Sean Payton said, in his opinion, Horn wasn't healthy enough.
I'm probably the most selfish person in the building. I want to win all these games. So there would be no reason at all why, if I felt like he was healthy enough to play, that I wouldn't have played him.
Head coach Sean Payton, as he always does, said the right thing. Even though the Saints traded up in the 4th round to draft a running back, Payton said of Deuce McAllister, quote, "We have a lot of confidence in Deuce." Payton added, "Don't read too much into it. It's hard not to." Antonio Pittman of Ohio State starred in the Big Ten. He had 14 100-yard rushing games. He's durable, starting the last 25 games for the Buckeyes. He doesn't appear for me to be just insurance, but that's all he should be. In 2006, Deuce McAllister came back from major knee surgery to rush for 1,057 yards and 10 touchdowns. In the playoff win over Philadelphia, Deuce ran for 143 yards. He scored twice, but at some point, Deuce's rising age and paycheck won't equal his productivity. Let's hope the Saints don't jettison too soon the Saints' all-time leading rusher. Antonio Pittman, just a coincidence, or a little more to it. I mean, if the guy drops to your spot, maybe so, but when you trade up for him, I think that raises a few eyebrows.
I think also, too, you have to look at it in terms of, is this guy going to be able to get on the field? And also, if you don't think he's going to be able to get on the field immediately, why did you pick him? Because they have some other needs they could have addressed. A younger guy, they could have plugged in a defensive tackle or could have plugged in a linebacker. I think that if they don't anticipate that Pittman's going to play much this year, aside from special teams, they think he's going to get on the field in the next couple of years.
I think there were a number of quarterbacks on the board at that point, too. And Sean Payton said last year that he's always in the business of developing young quarterbacks. If that's the case, there are a number of guys there who could have been projects. But what does this mean for Aaron Stecker? What does this mean for Jamal Branch, the guys who did that third running back role? They may be more in jeopardy than Deuce.
I think both of those guys are headed out the door, to be as kind as we can about it. That's just the way it is. It's a numbers game.
And Pittman isn't really a specialist. He's a guy that needs to get the ball 20, 25 times a game.
He's an inside
He's not
runner.
a third down back, and he's not a guy who's going to return kicks for you.
Exactly. Use sparingly in the passing game. Now, a guy that I think was very interesting when the Saints chose Greg Olsen, the tight end, a great stretch-the-field guy, would have been great in the West Coast offense. Did it raise any eyebrows with you guys when the Saints passed on him?
I think they're thinking that Eric Johnson, they're hoping that Eric Johnson's going to stay healthy because he has the credentials, but he also has a history of getting injured. They need him to be healthy because they haven't had a dependable pass-catching threat at the tight end position since Wesley Walls. It's long overdue. I'm sure Sean Payton, who loves to tinker with his offense, he wants to have that threat at tight end. They haven't had it, and they need that. So I thought that they might look at Olsen, but I guess they looked at Meacham and said, this is the best guy on the board.
I was surprised they didn't take a tight end later in the draft because they had a number of them out there as well.
All right, quickly, let's get to the grades real quick. Sean, you had a B-.
I like what they did in the early round with Meacham. Also, I think Usama Young, it could be a good pick, and I also like the late pick of David Jones.
I give it a C+. Still, this grade could get better. Still a lot of unknown commodities. Bushrod, Jones, Alleman, Young. Who are these guys? We'll find out soon. Maybe the grade moves up or moves down.
I'll give it a B- like Sean. Don't know too much about the second-day guys. Antonio Pittman, interesting choice. Robert Meacham, a good one, but maybe I would have gone tight end. We'll see. We thank you for watching the Dodge Chrysler Jeep Draft Day 2007 on ABC 26.
With the draft, did it?
No, they quickly turned their attention to the undrafted prospects. Free agents arrive as camp bodies and cannon fodder. But occasionally, one or more will stick around and contribute in the regular season to the NFL team that gave them a shot, though a long one. The Saints won't confirm signings until later in the week, but these players appear to be coming here for rookie camp, or at least on the Saints' radar. They are LSU tackle Peter Diakowski, University of Alberta long snapper Pat McDonald, Houston linebacker Wade Cale, and a Seattle basketball player who could get an audition as a tight end, Michael Haddix, in addition to Pitt quarterback Tyler Palko. A year ago, Sean Payton was still trying to make an educated guess as to what kind of players he had on his roster and where he needed the most help in the draft and free agency. 1 year later, that's no longer the case.
I probably, as the head coach, have a lot better handle on that current roster overall than maybe this time a year ago, even on our own roster, because, you know, this time a year ago, we had just had that 1 3-day mini camp, the extra camp that the league gives you as a new coach prior to this draft, and that was really the only, aside from any film work, information we had on our players.
What a weekend it was for draft choices, and free agents will be coming here in a couple of weekends to begin their orientation with the Saints in practices that are closed to the media. And even if it looks like a guy's just been invited to serve as a camp body so other players won't get leg weary, that doesn't always prove to be the case.
Jamal Jones was a player that was one of those 3-day workouts, you know, a year ago, just to come in and give us some snaps, and he ended up really impressing a bunch of us just from a speed standpoint, and he ended up making the team. So it does give us a chance to evaluate some more players.
For LSU